So Thomas, Mr. Mashup himself.
Yeah. 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 So yeah, I see a lot of voice pairing mashups. What does that mean?
Pandering will get you nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. Here's my prediction for what the future is going to hold for us. I think we're going to look back on these times in 5 or 10 years. And there's going to be a young engineer at some point. I'm going to be saying to him, yeah, really, it used to take months to deploy a switch. And yeah, if you wanted to start a carrier, like you had to spend not millions of dollars, but tens of millions of dollars. And yeah, no, really, you had to like work on tenth of a penny margins. That was really fat back then. And they're not going to understand it because they're going to be working on over-the-top solutions where the per minute cost didn't matter because the value was so much greater than the per minute cost that no one cared about the per minute cost. They're going to be confused about. You mean to say I had to have a contract with someone to get termination? That's going to be weird to them. They're going to be living in a cloud computing world. They're going to be living in an API world. They're going to be living in these transactions world, and they're going to be able to. And the biggest thing is going to be, wait a second, you only did phones? That was your only business? You're like a phone guy? You're like, it's like saying you only like make matches? Really? Just matches? That's all you did? Yes, all I did was phones. Because what's going to happen is phone stuff, because of APIs, is going to be everywhere, and anyone who actually does anything with a phone will have nothing to do with the phone, because it'll be like an API call for them. I'm going to be a human resources software engineer, and I'm going to include in my application the ability to send you a notification that someone got fired. Okay? And the fact of the matter is, the notification that someone got fired is such a small little part of my application that I'm never going to identify myself as being a notification person. Why would I do that? I'm a human resources person. What's going to happen is the whole idea of the bulk of work being assigned into the telecom world is going to be a little bit silly. Because what's going to happen is it's going to be like, it'll be the same thing. Here's an analogy. It's just like us saying, you know what, I'm really big into web servers. Web servers, they're really big. I mean, like, that's what I do. I'm a web server guy. And you're going to say, wait a second. Okay, we all in our lives, everyone here in this room uses web servers, and maybe we write web pages, and maybe we like have engineering departments that write websites, but none of us are experts on web servers. Yet we all use them, and freely so. In fact, I would be willing to bet that nearly every laptop open has at least one web server running in it. Yet none of you are web server guys. So someone a lot richer and smarter than me once said that human beings tend to overestimate the impact of things in the short term and underestimate them in the long term, and I'm not sure who said it, but I firmly believe it to be true. What's happened in our industry, and especially in the last 5 years, is we have radically and ridiculously lowered the barriers to entry to doing voice stuff, which makes the business models that we need to support them much easier to find, and they're much smaller. And you know, thank you everybody who is working on APIs. Thank you everybody who is providing them through your service. Don't be discouraged if there aren't many people there yet. It will be the dominant model because it makes economic sense. You know, for better or worse, I've been in this market a long time, and the fact of the matter is the most crushing thing, the most important thing, the thing that made the most difference in voice over IP has not been the features. It has not been the applications. It has been the economics. Economics win out. And that's why I firmly believe that this whole idea of APIs and mashups and web stuff is going to win because the economics are just so much better for people who design applications. Because the economics are better, you don't have to find these amazing business models. You don't have to find an amazing business model because the economics are just naturally better. So that's my prediction.
Well said. Okay, now Charlene's a little nervous, she tells me, because she says she didn't know anything about telecom. I said, don't worry about it. You tell us what you know and what you think. They'll figure out what it means for them. You don't have to worry about that. Really, they're not going to bite you.
I have a list of things, but let me just take off of what you were saying, because one of the things I look at are applications on the web, all the things that you can do, all the great proliferation of little bits of applications, mashups, I call them widgets, things that I can just plug and play. And I'm not a technologist. I know very little technology, enough to get me in trouble. But I can go out there and now create these mashups. I can use Popfly, I can use Yahoo Pipes, just by dragging and dropping and create really full-featured websites, rich things. I can add voice, and all of them are commodities. And you talk about commoditization at the application layer, and that forces you to say, okay, where is the value actually going to be created now? The business model, I think, in many ways is going to be, in many ways, advertising supported. Because if you can build up by volume or by targeted, but within these applications by the people who you attract, you can actually create a business model that becomes not traditionally in the space. A lot of the research I'm doing then, therefore, is looking at sort of do-it-yourself applications, when you can actually push these application developments over to the business user, somebody who doesn't need to know anything about technology, so they can apply voice, apply the technologies into the situations where it makes sense for them. The other key area that I look at is the social networks, the social technologies that someone actually explained to me is sort of the layer 8 of the OSI. Someone said to explain that. I'm not quite sure what that means. But it's that layer above it in terms of not so much user error, but the user inputs into the network. Now, I think it's important because the social networks that you think of today, places like MySpace and Facebook, are really self-contained, the walled gardens. But I think we're going to look back 5 years from now and say that was really quaint that we had to go someplace to be social with somebody in order to go there and communicate with the people. Because the key thing here is that it's not about being social. Social is built on communications. And frankly, I can't remember when I talked to somebody, emailed them, Twittered them, instant message them, Facebook them, all of those things kind of munge together in terms of my communications with them. And in fact, I make a dichotomy between synchronous and asynchronous communications. Synchronous, great for voice, video. Telepresence is absolutely mind-blowingly amazing. But when it comes to asynchronous, the last thing I want somebody to do is to leave me a voicemail, because then I have to send them back a voicemail, and it's just voicemail hell. So it's gotten to the point where I don't let people basically leave voicemails for me, or I punish them by not checking my voicemail for days on end.
Yeah, that's what my wife says about me. Yep.
Yeah, and so they're trained to always email me or text me or Facebook me. So my philosophy here is that communications will become like social networks, like air. You will be able to reach out to your communications, to your address books, wherever and whenever you need them. And the idea of this, for those of you in the panel earlier today about federated social networks, it's about opening up these social networks so that you can get information out of them with data portability. So a quick example is, for example, Thomas was just saying that he actually bought the book that I wrote.
Show the book.
Okay, so the book, here it is.
I bought her book last week. I had no idea she was going to be here, and I bought her book.
And so one of the things that you could have done is like, is this a good book to read? And if you go to Amazon, you can see reviews from people you don't know, but what if you could actually see a review from somebody you know? But they didn't write it on Amazon, they wrote it on a social network or a blog, but it's brought to you where you need that information. Now, I can go and get onto all of my social networks, all of my web addresses through this, and this actually has identity to it. My social network has an identity. My email is my identity. So being able to put all those things together and to know presence, when people can find me, these are sort of the things that I'm looking at. The one other thing that I am looking at is the proliferation and the explosion of IP devices. And in particular, I have this little widget display thing called a Chumby. I don't know if any of you have seen these things. You have a Chumby. It's this cute little thing. It actually has an accelerometer, so you can play motion games. And it has little widgets that you can download to it. Now, that's an IP device. You just plug it into your network, and it starts working. And what's amazing is that I can see little Chumby-like things, IP devices, a little button in my closet that gives me weather updates. A weather thing on my sprinkler gauge that's IP connected.
My son has the Abe Vigoda Death Watch. Every day it tells him how old Abe Vigoda is and what the chances are he'll die tomorrow.
There you go. That's a wonderful little widget that appeals to one particular person. And so, again, the picture frame could be an IP device, a big, huge seller last Christmas. That can be an IP device that's socially aware. So I can load pictures up to that, automatically updated and refreshed from my Flickr or PhotoBucket account. And then that is spread out through my social network of the grandmother, the aunt, and the friend living in London who wants to see my pictures of my kids. So that's sort of like my vision of where these social networks and the communication layer really come and start merging together.